I'm Craig Nash, senior editor at Good Faith Media.
And I'm Hayoung Park, a social work and theology student.
We are co-hosts of the Good Faith Bible Studies podcast, where we explore and discuss the weekly biblical text and lessons found in Good Faith magazine.
We'll also share ideas for leading group discussions on each week's text and lesson.
Let's dive in.
Today's passage comes from 1 Corinthians chapter 1, verses 18 through 31. For the message about the cross is foolishness to those who are perishing, but to us who are being saved it is the power of God. For it is written, I will destroy the wisdom of the wise, and the discernment of the discerning I will thwart. Where is the one who is wise? Where is the scribe? Where is the debater of this age? Has not God made foolish the wisdom of the world? For since in the wisdom of God the world did not know God through wisdom, God decided through the foolishness of our proclamation to save those who believe. For Jews demand signs and Greeks desire wisdom, but we proclaim Christ crucified, a stumbling block to Jews and foolishness to Gentiles. But to those who are called, both Jews and the Greeks, Christ the power of God and the wisdom of God. For God's foolishness is wiser than the human wisdom, and God's weakness is stronger than human strength. Consider your own call, brothers and sisters. Not many of you were wise by human standards, not many were powerful, not many were of noble birth. But God chose what is foolish in the world to shame the wise. God chose what is weak in the world to shame the strong. God chose what is low and despised in the world, things that are not, to reduce to nothing things that are, so that no one might boast in the presence of God. He is the source of your life in Christ Jesus, who became for us wisdom from God and righteousness and sanctification and redemption, in order that, as it is written, let the one who boasts boast in the Lord.
I had these thoughts about this passage before we started recording, and I even just hearing it kind of enhanced some of these thoughts. And they're kind of a weird connection I'm about to draw here. Have you ever seen Lost?
I've not.
Okay. So I feel like Lost might be on the verge of your generation discovering it because it's, I don't know, probably about 20 years old. And this feels like a tenuous connection I'm drawing here, but it makes sense in my mind. For those who've seen Lost or for those who haven't, again, 20 years, I'm about to give some spoilers, so you've had time to learn. But I won't give too many spoilers. But, the premise of Lost is this flight crashes on an island. They're stuck there. It's this mysterious island. All these things start happening. They run into other people who've been on the island. They thought it was deserted before. There are monsters. There are all these mysteries surrounding the island. This cast of characters include just a wide range of people. And it goes on, I think, 5 or 6 seasons. And, throughout the island, the drama is created by just a lot of chaos and kind of traditional storylines of power versus weakness and people, manipulating systems and manipulating relationships in order to discover what's going on in the world and to gain status in the world. There's this character, these two characters that for some odd reason this passage makes me think of. And it's an older couple, Rose and Bernard. And they, are part of kind of the storylines during most of this series, but they kind of fade off into the background. And you don't really know what happens to them. In fact, it's one of these shows where there's so many storylines happening that some people can leave for, weeks on end and you not even think about them because there's so much
off
stuff.
The face of the earth.
Yeah, and they almost literally did this in the middle of some big thing that happened. One of the characters kind of stumbled upon them in a camp that they had built, and were kind of shocked to see them, but also shocked that they were not consumed with all of the stuff going on in the island. And as you were reading this time, I thought too, they probably represent the two weakest characters on the cast. They're a little older. One of them, Rose, had a chronic illness, and they just kind of make a decision to step away from all of the chaos. And Rose is just this kind of sweet, contemplative figure who is very wise, very internally strong, but just doesn't doesn't want to have anything to do with what she would call the foolishness of the world. And for some reason, I just thought of that as we were reading this, about a perfect picture of what Paul is painting. And he's kind of setting up these two competing worldviews. One is, philosophy and strength and arguments, and the other is just a very simple embrace of this reality that we find life through death.
Right. Yeah, I think I'm so struck even in that story of like people who lean into their weakness, let alone accept it. I think those are both things that I struggle with. And that last section in the passage where Paul is like, the foolish things, like these are the things that God has chosen. I think that in some ways like feels to me like a call to own and lean into my own vulnerability, which I think is so freeing. And again, like so countercultural. Like we have every reason to cover up the things that make us feel weak and foolish, but this passage is suggesting otherwise.
So this is the last in the series on the opening of 1 Corinthians that Joy Martinez Marshall, who's the pastor of First Baptist Church in Ottawa, Kansas, brought to us. I appreciate in her curriculum, she drew connections between the philosophies of the ancient world. She talked about the Greeks and the Jewish people, and she kind of drew a connection between that and like a contemporary analogy of influencers and podcasters and talking heads that we kind of claim to follow. And at first I kind of thought, it seems like a little dubious connection, but the more I reflected on it, the more I realized it's really a perfect connection, because again, in my talking about Lost, I just have this picture of the noise crowding out noise in all of these kind of figures that we try to follow. It feels like noise.
Yeah.
A lot.
Yeah. I think one thing that I really love in referring to that noise, or contrasting that noise to this state of like foolishness that we're called to embrace. She says, if we don't have the space to ask questions about wisdom, the cross, and the world, where else will those conversations happen? I fear they don't happen at all. Or if they do, it will only be an angry all caps internet post. And so she's contrasting like we can live into this place where we're owning our foolishness, our questions, or we can kind of like bleed all over in our own community and seek like wisdom from these other like sources that are noise. And it reminded me of like the spiritual practice of confession and how that really embodies this whole like posture of like owning up to the things that make us the most scared and anxious, but then that being the exact medium through which we feel connected to others, to God, to ourselves, and also experience like liberation. Because I know that that's been true of me. Like there have been times where I've shared the thing that was like the scariest to share with somebody, but on the other end of that, I felt more free than I had ever felt. But I think that also to me like brings up the question of like, in what context is confession freeing and liberating? Also recognizing there are times when we confess things in churches and it doesn't end well. And sometimes people respond poorly or offer judgment rather than understanding.
Yeah, that's fascinating. I mean, confession really is a practice of weakness. Like it's choosing to be weak as opposed to choosing to like muscle through through the pain. We talked earlier off mic about how the strongest voices in our culture just have a strong sense of confidence and strength and certainty, almost so much to where there's like we've created an idol out of certainty and strength. But confession is kind of the antithesis of the idol of certainty. It's the practice of weakness.
Right. Before we discuss some ideas for leading a group through this week's text and lesson, we want you to know that we have created a leader's guide to help you prepare.
The leader's guide contains an overview of the lesson, some highlights to focus on, and several discussion questions for your group to go through.
For those questions, you can focus on one or all of them or any combination. Also, feel free to adapt them for your particular group's needs.
The leader's guide can be found at goodfaithmedia.org.
So as I think about what it looks like to talk about this, churches and Bible studies, I think one question that might be interesting to ask is, what is one quote-unquote foolish thing that has helped you encounter God. The Bible study talks names some examples like a wildflower at the side of on the road and things like that. But yeah, it made me think of a couple years ago for seminary. I took a class about creation care, and a big part of that class was over spring break going to a farm that happened to be like restoring a prairie. And every day our assignment would be to go out into the prairie and just literally just frolic for several hours and then come back and report the things that we'd contemplated or learned or observed. And one time I was just like drawing flowers for several hours. And that was like weirdly a very spiritual experience. Yeah. Something that was so simple and seemingly even like maybe childish. But I felt so deeply connected to the world around me and felt so seen by God in that moment. It just became a very big cornerstone for me. But, it's such a simple thing that I can do literally any day.
Yeah, the interesting thing about that too is flowers, particularly wildflowers, even though they're beautiful, they're actually very fragile. Like they come apart pretty easy. And so there's kind of that weakness piece there. Yeah. Also, I was thinking Rich Mullins, singer, old Christian singer, passed away many years ago. He had this saying, he may have been quoting someone else, that consider the lilies is the only command I ever obeyed. That's what made me think of that.
Yeah, that's a good one.
Yeah, for me, I've shared about this in a lot of my writings, and particularly in Good Faith magazine. I'm kind of a part of a community in Tartu, Estonia, which is a random little town in a random little country in a random little corner of the world. And I discovered the place, around 8 or 10 years ago. Just kind of walked into this bar, just fell in love with the community and kind of became a part of the community. And the bar is made up of, it's very multicultural, people from the university who come from all over the world, but also old widows in the neighborhood. And pretty much everyone there is an outcast. They're not high in city politics, or none of them are famous people, and it's actually not hard to be famous in Estonia because of how small it is. But I just find so much like peace and joy in the midst of all of these misfits and outcasts, and in a way, it's an interesting kind of juxtaposition about other places. For me, I think an interesting direction to take this in a Sunday school class or small group, or even just talking among friends, is thinking through symbols that are like marketing symbols that we have, and maybe just naming some of them and what they represent. So in my mind, I was thinking, the Nike swoosh is kind of supposed to represent speed. Yeah. Then there's like, Gold's Gym naturally is like this strong, muscular guy. I don't know if you could think of other ones.
Yeah, the only one I can think of is Target. I guess it's
that's kind of
this like bold and very powerful imagery, and it's like even Target's like
in the bullseye, like you're hitting it and all that
accuracy.
Yeah, and then just kind of name some of those. Compare those to the cross, and this is like a perfect, I think, way to describe this passage is we've been in 2,000 years of Christianity. Much of that has been within Christendom, where the state has taken over the church and they've become mingled a lot. And so we actually associate the cross with power. But it's pretty fascinating that the cross is actually a symbol of weakness.
Yeah. I think I heard someone say that like wearing a cross on your necklace is almost like the modern day equivalent would be wearing like an electric chair on your neck.
Or a syringe. Or if there's a way to, do a gas chamber or something like that.
Right. And I think we don't often give credit to how violent like the imagery of the cross is. Like we're taking a symbol of capital punishment, of utter humiliation, and making it a sign of like our salvation.
Yeah. That's a perfect kind of place to close, is to just remember whenever we wear or see. I was actually in Nashville recently, and a cat or a Uber driver gave me a little wooden cross that someone made, and I was in conversation with this guy, and he and I are not theologically aligned at all, but I have that little cross, and I put it on my nightstand, and it means so much to me. And so just a reminder to, when we look at the cross or wear it or carry it around, that it's actually a symbol of weakness and not of strength.
Yeah, foolishness. I'm Hayoung Park.
And I'm Craig Nash.
And you've been listening to the Good Faith Bible Studies podcast from Good Faith Media.
Our music comes from Pond 5.
Each weekly lesson can be found in Good Faith magazine.
You can also sign up to receive a free digital leader's guide.
Learn about how to receive both these resources at goodfaithmedia.org.
There you can find daily news and opinion, various podcasts from our Good Faith Media team and partners, and information about the initiatives that help guide our work.
So visit us at goodfaithmedia.org, and we'll be back next week with another installment of the Good Faith Bible Studies podcast.